What's up, guys, and welcome to our next installment of our mini series that we're doing. Today, we are focusing on the New England Patriots. Last season, they finished the season 12-4, first in the AFC East, and they were outed in the first round, the wild card round of the playoffs, by the Tennessee Titans. Tom Brady's very last pass as a New England Patriot went for a pick six, and that officially ended his career as a Patriot. As we all know, he moved on to Tampa Bay, and he gets to play with a very nice set of wide receivers there. So now the new guys coming in, Jarrett Stidham and Cam Newton. For much of the offseason, we thought it was going to be Jarrett Stidham. He was, I mean, they've talked really highly of him. Both Josh McDaniels and Bill Belichick really like him. But then they go out and they sign Cam Newton on like a 1 year prove it deal. So according to our lads, which is the site that we use for depth charts, Cam Newton is in the starting slot. Obviously, with this weird off season, camps are going on. They started up already, so we'll see who ends up winning the job there. Probably going to be Cam, but who do you see starting week one? And do you think that the week one starter is a starter throughout the whole season?
Well, to start, is there anything as a Bills fan that makes you happier than the thought of Tom Brady's last pass being an interception? Because I can't think of a more satisfying end to his career,
I mean, he still has
honestly.
6 rings, so there's. I mean, he could throw 30 interceptions in a season, and he still has those 6 rings under his belt. But I'm just glad he's out of the division. I'm glad that. I mean, the team. We're going to talk about it today, obviously, but the team is. I don't think they're like finished in last place and pick Trevor Lawrence bad, but with the opt outs that they've had, with the team, without Tom Brady there, I mean, they could definitely make some moves, make some trades, sacrifice some of the future, move up to get that first overall pick with having not so good of a record overall. And I mean, that kind of scares me. But I mean, fantasy thoughts for 2020. There's probably not too much. Let's yeah. I mean, back to the quarterbacks here.
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's a really interesting situation, I guess. I mean, we're used to this team being very consistent. You know who's taking the ball under center every single week and every single game. So I do think I'm intrigued by Cam Newton's value this season. I do think that he's going to start, and that's not because I don't have faith in Stidham, but he did have a few snaps last year, threw a few passes in the regular season, and threw a pick. So, too many people I've seen are reading too far into that, in my opinion. They're saying, oh, he's not an NFL quarterback. I'm like, this guy has never even started a game. Let's not go that far. He's already Nate Peterman to a lot of people. So, I wouldn't go that far, but I think Cam Newton's going to start off the season just to see where he's at this point in his career. I think to me, he's not that top 10 quarterback that he used to be. And we saw that even before the injuries. He just wasn't the same. And the reality is, for the way that he plays the game, a very aggressive, he's not running out of bounds. Cam Newton does not run out of bounds. That's not in his DNA. So for me, he was going to have a shortened career, and we started to see signs of that. His arm strength wasn't what it used to be. So in 2018, he finished with the eighth most points per game. And for me, it's just he's going to have to change his style. A lot of that had to do with his running ability as a quarterback, and we know that. We talk about that with Lamar now. The reason that he's so valuable as a fantasy asset is because of his legs. So with Cam Newton, based on his injury history now, he's going to have to change that style, in my opinion. He's not going to be able to be as aggressive with his legs, and he's going to have to be a little more conservative, which is what this Patriots offense has been known for. But with all that being said, he is coming off the board right now as the 21st quarterback. I do like him at that point because you're starting to talk about guys like Kirk Cousins in that spot. And if I had to pick between Cam Newton and his upside with his legs, even though I do think he'll have less than we've seen previously, versus a low volume guy like Kirk Cousins, I'm taking the chance on Cam Newton based on his history and based on his ability. So as much as I'm not sold on him. I know some people are going nuts taking him as a top 10 quarterback, and he definitely will go higher in drafts, in my opinion, based on name recognition alone. But I'm not buying it yet. I think people forget what he was before this injury, and he did look like a guy that was starting to struggle a little bit and start compared to previous seasons. So I'm not sold on Cam Newton. We'll see what they do with Jarrett Stidham. If Cam Newton struggles in the beginning of the season, I wouldn't be surprised if Stidham started a few games. And I won't even say that I think Stidham's their future either. I think that if they struggle enough, there's quite a few QBs in this upcoming class. I know the last time I checked a few weeks ago, there's 5 guys they're giving a first round grade right now. So there's some opportunities for the Patriots to look for QBs moving forward, but we'll see with Stidham. And you and I have talked about this before, but he's a huge question mark. Nobody knows what this guy is at the NFL. I can't sit here and say, oh, he's going to be a top 10 QB. He's going to stink. We just haven't seen enough of him yet.
Yeah, I mean, just fantasy alone, Cam Newton definitely offers, I think, a little bit more than Stidham. Even without seeing Stidham, we don't know how he's going to be. But Cam Newton, obviously, he's had the MVP season. He still can run it. You already mentioned it. He's probably not going to run it too much anymore, or it's probably going to come down a little bit. But I mean, he still has his legs. He's still a big body, stand in the pocket quarterback, kind of like a Josh Allen build. Basically, he's a big body, real tough. He can take those hits. He's gonna vulture some touchdowns on the goal line and inside the 5, which is actually a nice segue into our next position group here. It's the running backs. Now, this this might be the ugliest room in the entire NFL, just from a fantasy standpoint. I mean, the way that New England uses their running backs, it's you can have a 4 touchdown game one week and you could be cut the next week. That's just how it is. I mean, Sonny Michel is a former first round pick who might be starting the season on the pup list. Damian Harris, he doesn't really offer anything in special teams. So if he makes this team, if he makes this roster, if he's activated on game day, you know he's going to be making it. He's going to be seeing the field in some offensive capacity. James White, he was a favorite target of Brady for his years there. How does Cam Newton use him now? Is he going to use him the same way? Is he still going to catch those balls out of the backfield? I mean, you take the quarterback away from James White, but you still have James White. You know what he can do. So, and then finally Rex Burkhead, who is I mean, he's just another guy that's added into the list. I mean, there's really not one that I feel comfortable taking at really any point in the draft. I mean, I might grab a Damian Harris later on, and maybe he pans out. He ends up being the guy. James White, super late. I mean, I'm not sure where these guys are going as far as ADP go. I don't have that off the top of my head in front of me, but I'm not really comfortable with any of them. Just outside of a flex spot on any of my fantasy teams. And then just as a note, Brandon Bolden opted out for Corona, so he's not there. So it's basically down to these 4 guys, and of all the teams that we've talked about so far, I mean, I don't think we've even touched 4 guys. So it's. I mean, what's your thoughts on this backfield? Let's put it that way.
From a fantasy standpoint, it makes me want to throw everywhere. I mean, it's pretty terrible. I mean, and you don't really want to sort through situations like this, but I'll go into it a little bit. So Sony Michel is currently going off the board as the 32nd running back. You've seen it slowly drop. He is expected, as you mentioned, to start the season on the pup list. And I think that's fair value for him if he's healthy. I mean, last season he averaged the 33rd most points, or in 2018 actually, he averaged the 33rd most points per game, and even in 2019 he only averaged the 40th most. So this is a guy that doesn't really offer very high upside. I had higher expectations for him coming out of Georgia, but he struggled with those injuries, and I think that's going to plague him for the remainder of his career. So I don't think Sony Michel is much of a threat this season. I don't love his value. I expect it to continue to slip, but even if he's the 40th guy off the board, I'm looking for upside. And at the end of the day, with a backfield that's muddied, I mean, how much upside does Sony Michel really offer? I mean, it's probably pretty limited. So I'm not really touching Sony Michel. Rex Burkhead, I know I've seen some people that like Rex Burkhead. He's not really being drafted in fantasy leagues right now. I mean, he's going like running back 70 right now. So if you're drafting him, you probably have 100 rounds in your league right now. But I mean, you mentioned it. The Patriots really value versatility, and that's kind of the name of the game for Rex Burkhead. He had over 200 special team snaps last season. Not that anybody cares about that for your fantasy league, but it's gonna keep him on the roster. He'll get some goal line carries. He's had some success with that in the past, but this is just a do-it-all guy. They'll for him. He'll catch some passes. He'll score a few touchdowns on the goal line, but he's never going to be a consistent fantasy producer. The only one that's only going to be consistent here is James White, if anybody, and he's really always been right around a top 25 guy in PPR formats. He's currently going as the 36th running back off the board, so I do think that's pretty decent value for him. He's one of those names where he's not sexy. It's similar to Tariq Cohen. In PPR formats, they're going to get their receptions. That's the fact of the matter. And I know a lot of people are down on Tom Brady is gone, and they say, "Oh, Tom Brady checks it off to James White." I mean, I think people are forgetting that Josh McDaniels is there, and he's still calling the plays. So I don't expect this offense to change as much as people think, with or without Tom Brady. And I know Cam Newton's a different kind of quarterback, but they're still going to run routes for James White out of the backfield. Cam Newton's not going to just bomb the ball 40 yards every single play. So I think James White is still going to have value out of the backfield. My favorite, as you mentioned, is Damian Harris. He's going as the 58th running back off the board. I think he has the most upside, and he's going the latest. So that's the reason that I like him the most. He reminds me, he's more of an in between the tackles, hard nosed kind of runner, but I could really see him having a Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis kind of season. And we've seen Patriots players have seasons where they have 10 plus touchdowns and they're more just ground and pound guys. And I think that Damian Harris fits into that role really well. And with the versatility of Rex Burkhead, if Sony Michel's not there, I fully expect for the first 4 weeks of the season at least, you'll have Rex Burkhead, Damian Harris, James White, and I actually think J.J. Taylor makes the team as well. He's another versatile rookie that they have undrafted, but he special teams, and from what I've read, they really like him as well. But I think you'll see James White as a third down guy. I think given a few weeks, Damian Harris is going to be the first and second down, not bell cow back, but on early downs in their goal line guy. So I like Damian Harris's value quite a bit. And even though I don't trust any of these guys, if you're taking them, in the 15th, 16th round, there's really nothing to lose there. And you could have yourself a solid flex guy or maybe even RB2.
All right. Now, as we all know by this point, the Patriots had the most opt-outs for Corona, which I'm bringing this up because it kind of ties in with the O line. They've had a couple people from the O line opt out. So, are your notes for the O line, are they updated? Did they fix any of that, or how does that work? Because I know that whatever. I mean, if it's not updated, then the O line is definitely not as good as what it was before these guys opted out.
Yeah, no, and it's not overly updated. And what they only had one starter that opted out, correct? As of
Marcus
right now, their
Cannon,
right tackle.
yeah,
Yep.
Marcus Cannon,
Yep. So
and
yeah.
yeah. I mean, I don't know what Najee Turan was gonna do, but it's how is the O line without him?
So the offensive line with him was ranked seventh. They had coming into the season, but they actually had Gilbert as the lowest rated player on that offensive line. So you could argue that it doesn't have as big of an impact as people or Marcus Cannon, sorry, not Marcus Gilbert. But either way, they had him ranked pretty lowly, but he's been very consistent, if anything. There's a big question mark there because you really don't know who's taking over. So, if anything, I don't personally think one offensive lineman makes or breaks your unit. Maybe they're not seventh anymore, but I would say they're still a top 12 unit and would only bring them down a few notches.
All right, so that's sure to hopefully help out Cam, keep him healthy, and maybe get one of these running backs to kind of emerge and make him fantasy relevant. Next up, we got the wide receivers. Obviously, the one that everybody knows, the mainstay there, Julian Edelman. That's probably going to change a little bit with Cam Newton there. He's not really a guy that throws those short routes into the slot. The guy that I think is going to be taking a huge step this year, if Cam Newton's under center, is their first round pick from 2019. That's N'Keal Harry. He's more their deep threat guy, their big body guy, the kind of guy that Cam Newton likes to throw to. Kind of like what he had with Devin Funches in Carolina. I know we all make our jokes about Devin Funches, and he's been a bum the
Uh,
last 2 years. But if like Cam Newton had a rep with Funches back when he played in Carolina, so that's if he could get that on an N'Keal Harry, that's a pretty solid. It could be a wide receiver 3 flex play right there. Mohamed Sanu, who they got in a trade from Atlanta last year, he seems to be slotted in as their number 3. And then the only other one that I would probably put any kind of stock into would be Jacoby Myers. But again, I mean, it all comes down to the quarterback and what their offense is going to look like, because it's not Tom Brady sitting back there having less than a second to throw the ball. It's either Cam Newton or Jarrett Stidham, who are not Tom Brady. So, I mean, what's he going to make of these wide receivers? Are you touching any of them? And if you are, who are you looking at?
Yeah, I mean, so starting off with what Cam Newton prefers, you got to bring up at least the best big-bodied wide receiver he had, Kelvin Benjamin, who had a few big seasons. So it seems like Cam Newton and N'Keal Harry, as of right now, fits into this perfectly. He likes big-bodied wide receivers that can't catch the ball. N'Keal Harry already is. There's been some people that based on camp reports from last season, he struggled with consistency in terms of catching the ball. So we'll see if he can fix that. And I think that's really going to be the difference in his career. Is he going to be Devin Funchess / Kelvin Benjamin, or is he going to be a legitimate big threat number one wide receiver? That's a difference right there if he can find more consistency catching the ball. As of right now, I'm all in terms of his value. He's going as a 51st wide receiver off the board. And the Patriots don't really draft wide receivers in the first round, so this says a lot. They had a lot of faith and confidence in him coming out of college, so they'll definitely give him an opportunity to be their number one wide receiver. It's just on him now. He has every opportunity, so we'll see if he can make the most of it. But as the 51st wide receiver off the board, you really can't argue with that value. He's going as a fourth or a fifth wide receiver on your team. So at that point, maybe he becomes a bye week fill-in, or you just drop him at that point. So I think he does have wide receiver 2 upside if he does fill out that wide receiver 1 role in New England. So he's definitely worth a chance. Mohamed Sanu, he's always been pretty consistent throughout his career, and he's just a very solid wide receiver. He's very rarely fantasy relevant. He'll have his weeks, but going as the 75th wide receiver off the board, as he should be, very limited upside there. Then I'll wrap it up with Julian Edelman. I struggle with Edelman. I think that his value is pretty good still. And you mentioned Cam Newton isn't necessarily known for bombing the ball down the field, but he's had some arm injuries now. We might not see the same Cam that likes to sling it down the field. So Edelman at the end of the day is just a perfect security blanket. And I mean, he's the best security blanket in the entire NFL. So he's going as a 32nd wide receiver off the board. And I still think that's awesome value for him. In his entire career as a starter, he's never performed that lowly. And I know this is a different quarterback, but 32nd is low as a wide receiver 3 in PPR leagues. If you look at his finishes over the past 4 years, he's been wide receiver 7, 15, 10, and 12. I mean, this is a guy that's always borderline wide receiver 1 in PPR league. So I love his value. And I know, once again, it's similar to James White. He's not the big number 1 sexy name that a lot of these guys are, but he's going to get you production. And at that value and where he's going in drafts, he might be your 4th wide receiver drafted. I've done mocks where he's my 4th wide receiver. And this is a guy that can provide great value for you. So I love it.
All right, and then before we move on to the tight ends, since all of their returners are wide receivers, I'll just bring them up. Mohamed Sanu, and Julian Edelman seem to be their punt returners. We've seen Edelman return a lot of punts in his day. Mohamed Sanu has also done it in Atlanta, so it all just depends on who's back there. If they're rostered, obviously, I mean, there's no reason why either of them wouldn't be rostered. So if you end up playing them a week and they end up breaking a punt return off, then that's extra points for you. Their kick returner is Matthew Slater, who's another wide receiver, but we didn't talk about. It's you're probably not drafting him unless you are looking specifically at a return man specialist, and there's a slot for that. So that's their special teams there, aside from their kicker, which we'll get to after the tight ends. And going into the tight ends, not only is Tom Brady gone, but Gronk is also gone. He was gone last year too, but Gronk is. There's no more Gronk, no more Tom Brady. This offense is just completely revamped. Matt Lacoste also decided to opt out, so we're down to 2 rookie tight ends basically that are going to be running this offense here from the tight end position. Devin Asiasi and Dalton Keene both were taken in the 3rd round of this past draft, and I mean, they both offer a lot in the pass game. They both can block pretty well. They are, I mean, they're decent tight ends, but it's how much stock can you put into a rookie tight end with a Cam Newton, with a, I mean, we've had the same coaching staff for many years, but this New England offense is going to look different than what we're used to. So, what do you think about these tight ends here?
Yeah, in redraft leagues, I'm not touching them. And that's a reality for most rookie tight ends for me. Even if I was 100% confident that they were going to be one of the top targets on their team, it's just historically rookie tight ends don't play that well. And of course, you have guys that are outliers like Evan Ingram had a huge rookie season for the Giants. Last year, even Noah Fant, he had a big season for a rookie tight end, having 550 yards, and he was still only tight end 16 on the year. So for a rookie to really make an impact, a rookie tight end that is, they have to have, six, 700 yards and 6 or 7 touchdowns, and that's very rare in today's NFL, or in the NFL in general. I won't even say today's NFL. I like both of these guys. I have both of them in several leagues, and that's where I think they should be at this point. Because the Patriots, they run the third most two tight end sets in the entire league, so both of these guys will be on the field. They'll both be involved, and you mentioned it. They're both very strong pass catchers and blockers, so that'll keep both of them on the field. I'm kind of looking forward to seeing how they use them long term, because I think this is their way of replacing Gronk and Aaron Hernandez still. I still feel like every year they were chasing that second tight end after Aaron Hernandez was gone. So I think that this combo is really interesting. They're both athletic, fast, speedy guys with great hands. Dalton Keene was actually used all over the field in college. He was a pass catcher. He lined up at tight end. He lined up at fullback. He took some carries. So when you think about the normal versatility that the Patriots really value, that's Dalton Keene in a nutshell. Devin Asiasi, I think year one will be more of a red zone threat. He's a big bodied guy. And when you look at this team, who is their red zone threat? I mean, N'Keal Harry's a big guy. So I guess N'Keal Harry and probably Devin Asiasi. So I like him from a standpoint that'll score touchdowns this year, but I just don't trust rookie tight ends enough. But it is possible when you look at this roster, who's their number one target right now? You have Julian Edelman, but after that, I mean, we don't really know. And one of these rookies could evolve and become that guy. But right now, I'm not confident enough in a rookie tight end. I'm playing the odds, and I'm going to stay away from them in redraft leagues.
Yeah, dynasty, take a flyer on them. Redraft,
Yep.
probably not. I mean, and we've mentioned it throughout our episodes so far up to this point. We're at pick 23 of the draft right now. We're going in order in case you haven't noticed that, and I think more than half the teams that we talked about have a pretty solid tight end option that you could use in fantasy. So you don't really need to look at these rookies here for a redraft. Before we get into the
Yeah, and one of the things,
defense,
just
oh sorry.
quickly, I mean, no, it's all right. One of the things I do want to say about Asiasi and why I like him long term is they did take him over Adam Troutman, which I was shocked with. And I remember when they were on the board, everybody knew the Patriots were going to be taking one or two tight ends in that draft because they have nobody. And they took Devin Asiasi over Adam Troutman, who was a lot of people's number one tight end on the board. So they definitely have a lot of faith in him.
Yeah, and we're actually going to be talking about Trotman in the next couple episodes. But yeah, moving on to the special teams. We already talked about the kick and punt returners. The place kicker, their long-term kicker is also gone. Steven Goskowski. They bring in a rookie in the fifth round, Justin Rosser. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. But he kind of falls in the same category as when we talked about Chicago, when we talked about Buffalo. They're up in like the Northeast, the windy area, snows, rains, outside, outdoors. We don't know how this offense is going to be, so kicking opportunities might be few and far between. The defense definitely took a huge step back between the losses in free agency and the opt outs. So I'm probably not taking a kicker from New England this year. As I mean, Guskowski was probably your third, fourth guy off the board in your redrafts and dynasties for years and years. But now we're getting into a new kicker, and we're kind of staying away. Are you in the same boat?
Yeah, for sure. And it's similar to rookie tight ends. There's very few rookie kickers that come into the league and set it on fire. So I'm in the same Asiasi and Dalton Keene, and I'm not stashing a kicker on my taxi squad, so I can't really see any relevance for Rauwasser this year. We'll see what he does. And going through this depth chart, they're a very young team, and we haven't seen a Patriots team that has been this young in a very long time. So we're really testing Bill Belichick's coaching ability this year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do. Moving on to the defense, this defense as a whole pretty much single-handedly won people leagues last year. They won games last year, putting up 20, 25, 30-point games with their block kicks, touchdowns, pick sixes, and all that. It's kind of been overhauled. I mean, their back end is still there. They got the McCourty twins. They got Stephon Gilmore. They got J.C. Jackson, Adrian Phillips. They drafted Kyle Duggar in the second round. So they have what they need to stop you from throwing it on them, but they don't really have what you need to get pressure on the quarterback and get those. I mean, they're going to be on the field a lot, I believe. So your linebackers, and you'll go over the linebackers. The only one I really want to bring up is, and this is going to go against everything that I've said up to this point, is about going with the cornerback in an IDP league. I think Stephon Gilmore is probably he's actually a good play. I mean, up to this point, I've talked about you don't want to take the team's number one corner, especially with how he played last year. But I mean, this defense it's not going to be what it was last year, and I think he's going to have more opportunity. Obviously, there's going to be some different defensive backs back there that you could get some more tackles from, but I think Gilmore is. I think he's going to have some more opportunity this year to put up some fantasy stats. Now, you're probably going to disagree with that. Teams might still try to throw against him, or not against him, but like away from him. But on the other side, you got Jason McCourty, J.C. Jackson. So I mean, you got some pretty good corners on this team. I think that if you want to take a corner, of all the teams that we've talked about so far, Gilmore might be a good way to go because the defense as a whole is not going to be as good.
Yeah, and to start it off, I mean, they had a historic season last year, and for teams that had the Patriots defense, this was legitimately like playing a second quarterback a lot of weeks. I mean, that's how good they were last season, and I really can't overemphasize that enough. But this isn't the same Patriots defense anymore. I mean, they already lost Jamie Collins, Kyle Van Noy in free agency, and then they had Dante Hightower opt out. So this linebacking core is a whole new unit this year. So I'm really interested to see how that shakes out for them. But with Stephon Gilmore, I mean, if you're going to pick a corner, if you have to specifically, I've been in a league before where they don't differentiate between. He's probably the number one corner IDP in the entire league, and I definitely wouldn't argue with that. He did have over 50 tackles last year, and I've seen a lot of leagues now where they've implemented pass defended as a stat category now. And if that's the case, Gilmore has a lot more value. He had 20 last season, and he was one of the tops in the entire league, so that does give him a bit of value. In traditional scoring, he was 24th among just DBs, so including safeties and corners. So still a solid second DB if you have to play two. So definitely still worth drafting. I wouldn't overdraft them, like I said, unless you're in a league that counts passes defended. And then going through the rest of this defense, I'm going to say up front, I don't think I would draft one other guy on their defensive front. There's just too many question marks for me. And the Patriots have been known when they have a defense like this with not a lot of big names, they're going to rotate guys a lot. And it's similar to we talk about running backs. Oh, who's going to get the ball on first and second downs? Who's going to be the pass catcher? The Patriots do that with their defense, and sometimes they do it with their offensive line, which is kind of interesting. But they'll rotate guys in. If he's a better pass rusher, he'll be in on passing downs. If they have better run stuffers, they'll be in on first and second down primarily. And with this linebacking core, there's just a ton of question marks, and there's a lot of unknowns. So I'm not comfortable enough to draft any of them. If you're looking for tackles and their linebacking core, you're probably going to look at the linebacker spot first. He is listed as one of their inside linebackers right now. So once again, he's a guy, and I've talked about this before. I'll throw a lot of linebackers on my watch list early in the season to see who's going to lead the team in tackles. And if you're talking about vacated tackles here, I mean, they have a ton. I mean, their entire linebacking core is gone now, so somebody's going to have to pick up that slack. I think Jawan Bentley is a solid candidate for that. They do have some young guys too. They took Josh Uche and Afrani Jennings from Alabama, so those are two young guys where if you're in a heavy IDP dynasty, I'd consider both of them because I do think they're going to be the inside linebackers of the future for the Patriots. But at this point, there's just too many question marks to trust somebody in IDP redrafts.
All right, so final thoughts on them. I mean, Bill Belichick is still there. You can never count him out, but I think that they do take a step back. They just got too many question marks just across the whole entire team, offense and defense. I don't think that. I mean, the division winner is probably, well, not probably. The division winner could be Buffalo, and only with 10 wins. So it's hard to find 11 or 12 wins from the Patriots. If anything, it might be another 10-6 team, and have a tiebreaker, or I don't know. I think they're better. I mean, they're definitely better than the Jets. Miami is up and coming, but I don't think they have that step on them. Even though they have played them pretty tough the past couple of years, Miami and New England games have been pretty close the past couple of years. So Miami's definitely on the come up. I'm still going to put New England up there in second place. But as far as like the playoffs go, there are 7 teams. I'm not going to count them out until they show me that they can't do it anymore. So I'll give them a wild card spot and maybe a 9-7, 10-6 record.
Yeah, I agree for the most part. I would put them second in this division just because I think the Dolphins are young and rebuilding. You could say that about the Patriots. I just mentioned how young their roster is, but I have more faith in Bill Belichick at this point to coach up those guys and Brian Flores, which is not a knock against Brian Flores. I love Brian Flores, and I talked about him way too much in our Dolphins mini. But the reality for me, and we haven't talked about this too much when talking about the standings, but the Patriots actually have the hardest strength of schedule 2020. So of any team in the NFL, so I think only one team from this division is making the playoffs because the AFC East as a whole, Patriots have the hardest, the Jets the second, Miami third, and then the Bills have the fifth toughest schedule. So I think whoever wins this division is going to be the only team that makes it to the playoffs. I would favor the Bills right now. Their roster is much better than the Patriots at this point. But like you said, as of right now, as it stands, they're still the kings of this division, and the Bills have to show that it's their time to take this division over. So as much as I still have the Bills finishing in first in this division, they have to prove that they're ready for it.
All right, so that's the New England Patriots. We'll see you guys next episode.